My name is Jonathan Dewey, and I was originally born in London, but I was raised in the States. So I grew up in Ohio, and I am currently an investment director at a small family office. I basically manage investments for a family, and that includes real estate, small operating businesses, it's just a little bit of everything. Oh, my art. Yeah, sure, sorry. So I'm not an artist by trade. I only started 3 years ago, and that coincided with when my son was born. And the reason why I started was because once you're a parent, you quickly realize that everything is just flying by and you're forgetting moments that just happened even earlier that day. And what I wanted to do was to make sure I had those memories recorded and written down. So I started drawing comics of those moments that I didn't want to forget about.
And when did it first, do you remember when it first started, or what kind of was the seed of the idea?
I guess it was the moment when, it was a moment when I was changing his diaper and he started peeing on me. And I was like, I don't have a camera to really record this, but I kind of want to remember it. And writing about it obviously doesn't have the same effect as a cartoon, so that's kind of how it all unfolded. Yeah, it was definitely a little bit of both. I've always been a huge Tintin fan. Always was really into the X-Men, so comics and graphic novels were definitely my thing. But it just also struck me as a medium that blended text and images quite well. Yeah, it was. There was a lot of relatability from the beginning, because I guess as a parent, it's a pretty universal process raising a kid, and a lot of similar frustrations and rewards throughout that process. So even from the very first comic, I would get a few comments from other parents that were like, "Oh yeah, I totally know what you're going through," and it was a really nice feeling. And I think that kind of helped spark my motivation to keep going with it, and sharing them as opposed to keeping them to myself.
At any moment, has it kind of helped you in the parental world? Because obviously, when you open up to this, you kind of end up having openness about pretty much everything.
Yeah.
So by having that, you maybe had any issue where actually you managed to kind of solve it from either someone you met for doing this, or just by being part of that community.
Yeah, I think it's it kind of is a two-way thing. On the one hand, me doing the comics is a very introspective, kind of looking at things in hindsight and sort of synthesizing, what had happened during that day, or as a parent, my philosophy of how I wanted to raise my kid. But at the same time, you're right. We've kind of built a nice community through the Instagram account, and I do get parents, when I run into a problem and I'm kind of drawing a comic about it, giving me suggestions about, you could try this, or this is what worked for us. And I think it's evolved in such a nice and supportive community. That totally was something I landed on. If you asked me 3 years ago whether it would be like this today, I totally would have never have thought so.
But did you ever sketch or something before?
No, I was.
Because it seems very interesting to me that you would pick a medium which you actually haven't really used before.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of the interest and passion that it kind of keeps you going. It's a medium I've always admired. Mm-hmm. But and I would, there were always a lot of hurdles where I made up a lot of excuses about why I didn't want to start, because I thought I sucked or I don't have the time. But once you find something that you're really passionate about, in this case, it was the subject of documenting my child's life. That's all you really need. Yeah, so definitely, it's kind of how you want to prioritize things, really. But for me, it just ends up falling into a time schedule where, I go to work, I come home, and I obviously want to spend time with my family, my child, and then I guess after he goes to sleep is probably the 2 hours in a day when the parents can sort of do what they want and catch up on house chores and such. So I think I've decided to dedicate that to the artwork and the housework, and I think the things that have suffered are probably my physical health. Yeah, it's definitely have had artist block, or you go through a stretch of days where you're so tired, or just there's nothing really funny or special kind of jumped out at you. So definitely I have had those days. And I don't know, I just go to sleep or just wait a few days and something will definitely happen when you're a parent. When it revolves around being open about yourself, that's okay. But being open about my family, which involves my wife, my child, there are some boundaries that you kind of want to be conscious about in terms of what you're willing to share. Fortunately, my wife is okay, but I will admit that when it comes to sharing my child's life, he's so young, I can't really ask for permission. I do want to protect his privacy to some degree, so that's kind of always been an area that I've been a little bit conscious about. So I do use a pseudonym as opposed to his actual name online, and I've kind of stopped posting actual pictures of him and just recreated him in just the comic form. Yeah, so I have occasionally done prints for people who, I guess, for some more generic situations, they found them quite relatable. But I have actually also kickstarted a Choose Your Own Adventure parenting book, which involved using my cartoon illustrations, and I basically wrote the text for the parenting journey for the first 2 years. And you make decisions along the way, and depending on whether you want to, if you're sleeping with your child and you want to change their diaper in the middle of the night or not, I mean, maybe your bed ends up being all wet in the morning, or you end up sleeping through the night more peacefully. So it was a fun project, but that was another time when I did have to print out a lot of the illustrations as a result. It was definitely an interesting process. It was difficult, but to some degree I had that Instagram platform which I've built to kind of fall back on to begin with, which was obviously something you can promote or say, hey, I'm working on this project, do you want to support me? So I think that was the main crux of it. But I did have to put together effectively a proposal of sorts when you're building your Kickstarter page that easily lays out what I'm trying to do and why it's interesting for other people. But I think word of mouth is kind of what's most helpful in terms of if you make something so compelling, so funny, so interesting, having some samples and illustrations of that I've done in the past that other people can relate to, then it sort of snowballs into its own little thing.
And I guess it also maybe helps when you've got like your target group in a way.
For sure.
Are a very supportive group. They look after their children. That's
for sure.
Part of their job is, or part of their personal job is to be a very supportive individual.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's when you can identify with someone, and I mean, misery loves company. I guess it's kind of the thing. When you're a parent, there are some very miserable moments. Everyone still feels, I think, very fortunate and blessed about having the children in lives, but it can be difficult. And bonding over that with someone is definitely a very strong forms a very strong relationship. And once you want to support each other as a result of that. So yeah, that definitely was very helpful as well.
And what was the result of the group, the outcome, and the response, I guess?
Yeah, the response was great. I did manage to fund it successfully, so I did a small run of the book, and off the back of that, I found an agent, which I signed with in the U.S., and they're now pitching that book in the U.S. to publishers. And then an editor from China also contacted me for a similar book. So. It's definitely going in a way that I never would have imagined, and I'm really excited about what's to come. For me, when my son turned 3, which was earlier this year, that was a sort of big watershed moment for me in terms of, do I want to keep going with this? And it kind of goes back to the issue which I talked about earlier about my son's digital footprint that I was creating. And at that point, it was like 30, 40,000 people kind of following his life on my Instagram. And when he's 5 or 10 years old, would he want that out there? Are there moments when his friends would make fun of him? And those are all things that were very conscious. And I really questioned whether I wanted to continue with it or just make it all private. But at the end of the day, I think it's about choosing. I mean, it's also a very integral part of my own life. So I've kind of resolved to choose, be more conscious about the moments I choose to share, and the actual pictures I decide to kind of move away from on a permanent basis. And again, it's kind of about the positivity and the community that you build with these other parents and helping each other out. So I decided to continue on, but that was the moment where I really questioned whether I wanted to continue. I think it's the practice makes perfect sort of piece of advice I've never really agreed with. I think perfection is kind of a very philosophical concept and idea. I think practicing makes things permanent. So it makes things go quicker. But to me, it's just that's one particular one that's always stuck out for me. Yeah. So my wife and I just found out she's pregnant a week ago. So
Congratulations.
thank you. So I think what's next is I'm probably committed to doing comics for another 3 years, because the last thing I want is my second child to be like, my brother got all these comics for 3 years of his life. Why don't I have any? So I think at the very least, to be fair, I'll probably continue, and I think it'll be interesting to document the dynamic with the family of 4 and their relationship. So I'm quite excited for that challenge, but I imagine I'll be pretty tired.
I never thought of that, where it's like, oh yeah, like the second kid's gonna feel so.
Yeah.
Not only that, at the pregnancy.
Yeah, and the pregnancy, the process, yeah.
All his,
Yeah,
all
for
their
sure.
own things.
For sure, yeah. It's definitely going to be a whole new area of parenting that I haven't really commented about or documented yet. So.
And I guess now you've had the practice run,
Yeah, to some degree. I was just saying, I think it's going to be. I'm more scared the fact that I know what's to come, because the first time around it's sort of like, oh, I'm not sure what to expect. Ignorance is bliss sort of thing. But second time it's like, I know I'm gonna be really tired. I'm not gonna get any sleep. I'm gonna have to go through potty training again, changing all these diapers. So not really looking forward to it, but I know it'll probably be really fun. My main platform's on Instagram at John Ajui, and I do have Facebook and Twitter, but I also have a blog which is called bobosfieldnotes.com, and I post a lot of my comics there. And I guess on a monthly, it used to be a weekly basis, I write letters to my kid directly. But I think that's also something I've debated whether I should make private. But for the time being, it's still in the public domain.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.